Okay, here we are in Inkscape. I'm just going to go through some designy kind of stuff, and we can talk about what it all means and how it all works. I'm going to zoom in here. The bottom right corner, there's a little zoom tool, and you can do that different ways. So there are keyboard shortcuts for it, but I'm just going to use whatever I feel like. Okay, so I'm going to go pick the rectangle tool, which looks like a square, right? But if you want to draw a square, you have to use one of the hotkeys. Which one is it? Control. So it's Control, and it draws a square for you. That's cool and kind of, I guess, standard. And it's a blue color. I want to change that, and I kind of want to use a gradient. So I'm going to open up the Fill tool by double clicking on the little fill down here in the lower left corner. And there it is. And I guess it's not a tool, it's a dialog, right? It's a window or a kind of an area that opens up here. And to change your fill from flat to gradient, you just click on this linear gradient or the radial gradient. I'm going to use a radial or a linear gradient. And what I'm going to do is come down here to the Create and Edit Gradients tool. I click on that, and that gives me a little kind of on canvas way to edit the gradient. And I believe, yeah, if I hold down Control, I can make it move in increments of, what's that, 30 degrees or something, or 15 degrees? I don't know. So there I already have a gradient, and with this kind of software, usually out of the box, you'll have gradients that are pretty ugly, right? So the typical gradient, that you might expect would be something like black, right? So like a black to a white. And right now, Inkscape will it'll put one of these stops. These are called stops, by the way. These positions where there's a color. One of them has this A right here, or the alpha set to 0, and that means it's transparent. So we can change the opacity or the transparency. And opacity and transparency are almost the same thing. Opacity is how non-see-through something is, and transparency is how see-through it is. So if something is opaque, you can't see through it. If it's transparent, you can see through it. So if it's semi-opaque and semi-transparent, you're basically saying the same thing. So I like to use HSL colors. I can pick a hue, I can say I want a red, and then I can kind of filter down from there. I can say I wanted a red, but I want it to be a really colorful saturated red, and I want it to be a dark, deep saturated red. So I'm using HSL, but I wanted to show you that the kind of the default that you get a lot of the time with graphic software is a black to white gradient, which is just not helpful most of the time. And the reason that is that the gradient concept, this idea of a gradient, is meant to mimic real life lighting conditions. So when you see, when you look at the wall in your room right now, wherever you're at, you are actually looking at a gradient. Chances are, if you look up toward the corner, I'm looking up toward my corner, if you look up toward the corner of the wall, versus the part underneath the window, you're seeing in the corner it's darker, and the part under the window is maybe lighter. My curtains are reflecting light down onto the wall under the window. So the gradients are all around us all the time. My cat, right now, he's trying to get my attention, standing on my desk here. He has gradients, in his fur. When one of his hairs falls off, I can look at it and see there's a nice color gradient there, from a nice kind of a dark orange to a lighter orange to almost a whitish at the end. So gradients are meant to mimic real life, what we see in real life, and they're very helpful that way. And a black to white gradient, it doesn't look super appealing because it mimics something that we see in kind of less than ideal circumstances. Kind of like if you go into a dark room and you shine a flashlight onto the floor, this is what you would see, right? You would see it wouldn't be perfectly black and it wouldn't be perfectly white, but you would see this stark contrast from light to dark, so that you're shining your flashlight down below you and the room kind of recedes into darkness in the background. So it's not a very comfortable gradient, this black to white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can add stops here by clicking the Add Stop button. And I just added 2 stops. And you can switch between them to change the color of each stop here. So let's see what that did. So I'm going to make this top one kind of a dark gray blue. Go down to the next one down. Lighten it up a little bit. Bring some of that blue back in using the saturation. The next one, going down the list of stops here, I'm going to head over with my hues toward the greens. And let's see, how's that looking? It's okay, it's not bad. Let's remove some of the saturation. I don't want it to look too far, be too different from the one above it. So final stop here, I'm going to go again into my greens. That's an interesting color. I wasn't thinking about that, but that is kind of interesting. That's also interesting. Lots of interesting colors here. Ooh, that's kind of moody, right? So what I'm creating here is kind of this, I have this picture in my mind of this sort of a landscape that is kind of boring, but just kind of gives me an interesting background. It's a little bit dark. It's kind of like a storm is passing through, and you can still pick up the green of the ground, but things are getting a little bit muted grays in them because of the atmospheric conditions of the storm. So that's where I'm headed. And if I go too far toward the reds, toward the yellows and reds here, I'm getting an effect I don't want. So do I want it to be, yeah, if it's too cool, it looks like I'm almost looking into a pool there at the bottom, right? So I want it to be this little grassy effect here. Saturation is amazing. I mean, it's amazing how much a little tiny move in the amount of color that you've got in there can affect how the scene looks. Lightness. Okay, so being really drastic with it, I don't like that effect. Too dark, I don't like it either. So this is going to be a pretty blah background. But this is a principle I really like to emphasize, is that you should always let your background be a background. You don't want to let it take over just by virtue of it being maybe the first thing that you work on. You don't want it to then become the whole scene. And I don't like that this area right here is almost indistinguishable from the bottom, so I'm going to sharpen things up a little bit by maybe changing the color effect. Yeah, like that. Another thing we can do with stops is use this offset control. So if I go up to the middle here, one of these colors, I can actually change the offset so there's no gradient in between this stop and the one below it. So I can have where you can see a horizon line, right? So a very sharp one, or I can blur it way, way up. Kind of like it being around there. I do like that. That's nice. Okay, so that's enough background for now. Let's go to the circle tool. I'm going to draw a circle. And let's keep it a sphere for now, just to keep things simple. I'm going to hold down my control key, which on my Mac, I changed my caps lock key to be my control key because it's a little bit more convenient at times. And so I get confused a little bit sometimes when I use graphic software, but that's okay. It's worth it to me. The gradient editor is holding on to my last gradient. I'm going to close it. And the circle, this, I think I'm going to make this circle into a sphere. I've been thinking a lot about circles recently and spheres. And I noticed the thing where if you have like a regular convex polygon, like if you have like a triangle or a pentagon and it's convex, it fits right. The points like line up with a circle, right? So if you have a pentagon, it might have a point at the top, a point over here somewhere, one down here, and one up here. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there's a proof that as you add vertexes or as you add sides to a convex kind of regular polygon like that, it eventually turns into a circle. And I looked around and I found one, but it wasn't as, it wasn't as cool as I thought it would be to find the proof and read it. It just kind of made sense. And so I realized my question was, why circles? Why circles? Why spheres? And which came first, the circle or the sphere, right? Because the circle is kind of a section of a sphere. If you cut straight through this, if this was a ball, if you cut straight through it, you would have a circle, circular section. And do we have spheres and circles? Do we have them because of things like, physical laws, forces of gravity, that sort of thing? Or is there some other reason, some higher order law reason that they exist? I don't know. So kind of interesting to think about. And if there is a law like gravity that's pulling things toward a central point at the same rate, that's governing the sphere-like behavior. If that's what's doing that, did that really come first, or did spheres somehow come first? I don't know. I don't know if there's a way we can know, but it's really cool to think about, and it's remarkable how many amazing things we're surrounded by. So there it is, a circle. And you notice how the background colors changing make it look a little bit darker down here and maybe a little bit more purplish down here than it is on the top. But it's just a flat color. So kind of a little visual effect there. But I like that. I want to enhance that. I'm going to use a radial gradient. And now I have a ghost, a ghost circle floating here. And this is a foreground object. Because it's a foreground object, I don't want the ghosting effect because it merges with the background, right? So I want it to have sharper edges being a foreground object, because that's the way life works. If you have something that's closer to you, if you're standing outside or laying on the grass, if you're looking at a blade of grass, it's sharp. And while you look at it, the edges of your vision, things are not as detailed, right? So those physical facts follow us into kind of the graphics world, the design world. And so if you want to establish a clean foreground and background, you want to make sure that your foreground objects or object have sharp edges. So I didn't want that to happen really. Let's go into our gradient editor, and I'm going to go down and turn the other stop to totally opaque. Okay, there we go. Now what I can do is go to the top stop, and I can begin to darken it a bit, right? And I can go back to my gradient editor here, and that gives me a radial gradient editor where I can move the center of that radial gradient. And so I can create some sphere-like effects. I don't know. I don't think that's the color I want to have there. That's interesting. Kind of a light source, right? So the gradient, again, is becoming like it is in real life, an actual reflection of a light source. And in real life, it would be reflecting the color of that grass or whatever it's sitting on, which is called diffuse interreflection, I believe. So we want to mimic that. It wouldn't be so bright, probably. You'd be surprised though how much that happens. And if you wear a red T-shirt and you go stand against a white wall, it's pretty cool to see how much of that red can be. The wall kind of soaks up, and you can see that red in the wall. Light is really cool that way. And I'm not high or anything right now. I'm just I'm just pretty impressed by that kind of stuff, having done computer graphics work for a while. So yeah, there we go. That's kind of cool. Putting it down close to the ground here is a better reflection of what would happen in real life. So it's a little bit more realistic, and it's creating a little bit of a translucent effect, where we get the idea that maybe you can see some of the light through this object. Transparency meaning, you can see, and I don't know if this is true, but the verb parecer, is that what it is? I don't know. Anyway, but to be able to see something, transparency, I don't know if that's where we get the parency part, but the idea is that with transparency, you can actually see through something. With translucency, only the light is being transferred, and maybe you can't see the shape so well. So that's the difference. So translucency here, I like this effect. I also like that it's kind of in the middle. If we put it to the side, it's not quite the same, right? But in the middle, you get this symmetrical effect. And when you do things symmetrically, when you do them right down the middle, you get this kind of it adds this sort of unnatural feeling, right, to what's going on here. Okay, so I like that. I don't like the sphere. Now it's a sphere. It used to be a circle, but now we've made it a sphere, right? Because we added some lighting effects that make it look like a sphere. I don't like that it's sitting kind of in the middle of the composition. It looks a little bit weird. Don't like it down there. It looks too small, right? So we're changing our viewpoint because we're looking, the background is going from near to far, right? So if we pull the sphere close to us by pulling it down, it's giving it a diminutive appearance. It's making it look smaller. And as I make this thing go higher up, it's receding on that plane that's going away from us. So it's actually making it look bigger that way. And the reason, I'm going to show you why I really care about that in this composition. I like how the sky looks, but that's okay. The reason I care about that, I'm trying to see how much space I like over right here. I don't want to cut off I don't want this to become imbalanced. In other words, balance is key to our compositions here. Interesting. You see how it already forms, almost looks like a shadow under there? Another interesting visual, kind of a little trick your eye plays on you. Okay, so let's go to the pencil tool. I'm going to draw a person. Now, the reason I picked Inkscape for this video is it's available to everybody for free. You can put it on, any computer that you have, and it works pretty well on any platform, Mac, Linux, PC. So, where was I going with that? Anyway, I think that it's a really, really good tool. It's really nice to have. It's great for doing design things like this. I'm going to draw a person with a pencil tool. And I'm just drawing with my trackpad here. Okay. So there's my person. Does that look like a person to you? I hope you said no. Now I'm going to press Control L, maybe 3 times, 4 times after I've selected that, and that has simplified the edges so they're not quite so ragged. So there's my simplified edge person. Now what I'm going to attempt to do is use Inkscape's tools for deforming objects or tweaking objects here. It looks like a wave in the ocean over here. And it's funny, the rest of these tools, like they use greens and blues and kind of pinks. The one that looks like a wave is gray. And yet the rectangle gets to be blue. Why is that? That seems a little bit weird to me. I mean, as long as you're going to go to the trouble of drawing this cool wave shape, that might as well be the one that gets to be blue. I don't know. And having this 3D box thing purple-ish is kind of weird to me. Okay, so here we are. We've got these tools, and this is the different modes of the tool. Right now I'm in shrink. I don't want shrink, maybe push. And I want to Turn down the width up here. See what we can do. Ooh, spooky alien. This is like the guys from the book series, the tripods. That was kind of what I thought those guys looked like as I read that book series. Good books, by the way. Okay, so that's doing pretty well. Okay, and what I'm kind of envisioning in my mind is, and I could, you could try to go out with a foot or something, but I don't think that's necessary. I don't want to be too literal with this. I want it to be kind of a symbolic, abstract, that's a person sort of thing. Let's see. So it kind of looks to me like a guy. You're looking at him from kind of, here's his back, there's his legs, right? And there's his arm that's going, his hand is in his like jeans pocket or something. Maybe he's got a hoodie on. I don't know. But that's a quick way to do up a generic kind of a person. I just clicked white down there to fill with white. I'm not going to stick with that, but I'm going to go over to stroke paint here and turn off the stroke. That's the outline. I don't need that outline there. And now let's go and let's work on his color. I chose a gradient here. I'm going to edit that. And of course, it's semi-transparent, so I'm going to turn that alpha all the way up. And in my gradient tool, I'm going to make that path for the gradient go vertical. It doesn't have to be perfectly vertical. I don't want to, I want the colors to really work together here. I don't want this guy to be in competition with the rest of the scene, right? So I want to find a color scheme that's going to work. So I'll start by picking some colors I'm already using. So there's kind of a bluish on the top. At the bottom, I could head toward green at the bottom if I want to. And now here's the real secret. You've got this person standing near a sphere. This is one of my favorite things to do. Is I'm just gonna resize, and I'll hold down the control key as I resize. And now we have a gigantic sphere, right? So we've just by making him smaller, we have changed the entire characteristic of this composition, making it more obvious that that guy is going up to this big, huge sphere. I hit Control D. I selected him and hit Control D to duplicate him. So I made a duplicate copy. And I'll scale this one up just to work on it. Go back to my tweak tool. And let's see if we can make something that's different enough to bring some variety into the scene. I think this is a little bit too small. I'm getting details where I want to have. Wow, that really changes size quickly, doesn't it? Okay, a little bit better. What happens if I do that? Ooh, kind of saggy pants look, right? Too big. Okay. Get rid of the hoodie effect here, even if I have to smush the head down first. And okay, buddy, get down the lap. There you go. Cats are interesting drawing partners. They like to step all over everything. Yeah, I mean, it's coming out to be the same sort of idea as the previous guy. Let's see if we can fix that a little bit. I think part of it is the stance, you know, and the overall posture. Now we're getting somewhere. I'm doing very short strokes with this thing because I think the force is maybe too high. Let's try lowering the force. Yeah, it's better. I don't like that he looks like he's walking toward the, well, maybe that's okay. Okay, so he does kind of look like a guy without an arm, right? Without any arms. So what I could do is do like an arm shape, right? So I could do just a general arm shape. And you can laugh all you want at how simple that looks at first, but just give yourself some time to work with it. Mike Lynn is one of my designer heroes. He's a really neat guy, really charismatic and interesting to listen to. And one of his mottos for designers is the phrase, "I'm not done yet." And he really encourages you to kind of keep telling yourself that as you work on a project, say, "I'm not done yet," because what that does, I'm going to do copy. I'm going to select the arm I drew, and I'm going to do paste style. So I just moved the same visual style over so I can look and see how this club arm looks. But what that does is, as you tell yourself, "I'm not done yet," you're giving yourself permission to hold off on the criticism for just a little while longer. And it's giving yourself that time, that little extra time that's so crucial, so important. So again, I don't really need for this guy to look amazing right off the bat. And having the arms on his hands on his waist is sort of not necessary drama, right? I don't need that kind of drama here. I'm just trying this out to see if it even looks okay. It's not too bad. I already have somebody over there, right, with the other arm sticking out. So I really need to consider if I need another person doing that, or if that would kind of stand out too much. Or if I just want to kind of straighten this out and see if there's any benefit to having this arm coming off the side. I have to widen it a bit. Let's try this. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the original shape of the body too, so I have both of them selected. I'm going to go up to the Path menu and click Union, and now I've just joined those two, so they're part of the same object now. So now I can really kind of get in there and sculpt with this in a way that I couldn't before. And I can also go in with the Edit Path tool, and I can directly just influence these by direct action, a la Chuck Norris. So here we go. Is that the name of one of those Chuck Norris movies? Direct Action? Sounds like it should be. Direct action. When I had the stomach flu recently, it was amazing to watch action movies because they made me feel better. Like they made me feel stronger, even though I was just completely, I felt like I had an alien in my body. So any aliens out there, there's a tip for you. If you want to really make your human subjects happier, feel better about themselves, show them action movies. I'm going to move around a bit. And I zoomed in with a hotkey, which is like on my Mac, it's Command plus. But there's no way that's the same on a PC. You don't have the command key on a PC. So Control plus is probably what it is. Move this in. Oh, guys, I'm not sure. Right? But I'm not done yet. So let's keep working on this by removing part of it. Doing some surgery. I really love when you delete part of a path like that. Inkscape tries to use the remaining little points on the path, those little nodes. It tries to use those remaining nodes to make the shape that you had before you delete it. So I love that because you can start right from where you were almost, but with fewer nodes. And it allows you to make something that was kind of complex have the same shape with a more simplified appearance really easily. I don't like that armpit being so high. Normally a coat or something would get in the way and you wouldn't have that. Right, and so I'm almost willing to give up just because for the sake of people who are watching this video, it seems like this would be really boring to watch. And I might do that because I don't really care what people think about how this looks so much as getting some value out of what we're doing here. How does that look when I mean, I don't think it looks that great at this size, but how does that look when I'm down here? Looks like it needs to be longer. So let's try that. I can add nodes or I can add shapes. Let's add nodes. I'm going to click on, shift click on 2 nodes. Click the little plus sign here and insert a new one. Oh, deselect those other ones. Okay, here we go. Here we go, guys. This is going to be a bit better. Yeah, in fact, that can almost be, it's amazing what you can do with shapes, and people will pick out, they'll say, oh, that's an elbow. Just amazing. And you can fall back on that all the time. You don't have to do tons of stuff. Yeah, see, look at that. It actually looks like, you know, maybe there's some work to be done over here with the missing arm. Like that, maybe. But, you know, what we're doing here is we're creating the idea. We're convincing people that there's a person there, you know, with this terribly crude shape. And it's amazing that we can be that efficient, that our brains are so efficient that we can take shortcuts like this. And people kind of go, yeah, I see what you're doing there, you know? So that's cool. So there's an interesting effect. Okay, so I can change the location of this person. Like, it's almost like they're going downhill, right? And what happens? Let's see. What happens if I put her over here? It doesn't look as good. Interesting. If I put her up here, right, that's looking really weird because again, the perspective effect is off. I think I want to have somebody touching it. So I'll put her right there. And I had another idea, which was, okay, let's make this guy nice and big. It's like a blob, you know? It's doing nothing. Let's get rid of the hands. And does that do something? What does that look like? You know, I'm pulling back and I'm squinting at this. Just asking if that's doing anything, because I want to know if I don't want to waste any time, you know. I want to, if something just happened that I can use, I want to use it. If I can take these legs, kind of make them longer, and select these guys and move them over too, it does almost look different. And if I can tilt this front edge here up a little bit by moving this node, that's not what I want. But if I can move that node at the top, oh, there's like, how many do I have up there? Wow, okay, so a lot. So let's move these over and away. Crazy. So these got turned around, these little handlebars. Determine the kind of the characteristics of the curve. So I want these handlebars, that's what we call them, by the way, or handles. I want those to kind of go like this one to come back, and these handlebars to tilt. So now I have, yes, they're looking up now. And then what I want, right, is the arm. And again, I'm not done yet. Okay, so I just simplified it, hit Control L several times. And right off the bat, I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, select my object, Edit, Paste Style. Now, moving it too low, nope, yikes, not going to do that. There's that dip in the shoulder right there that wouldn't happen if you're raising your arm, so I'll fix that. But I just want to find the general location of where I want that to go. Okay, shift click the original object. Union. Reminds me of that song, Union of the Snake by Duran Duran. And now I don't remember anything about it other than that, but now I do. The Union of the Snake. Dun, 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 dun. Kind of a cool song. Okay. So, here we go. Look at that. See, you can make them into like a racquetball player. I like this idea, this abstract idea of the pointy hand. And I like it. And that's all I can say about that. I think partly because when you have an extremity like that, extremity? Appendage. Appendage? Extremity. Anyway, when you have something like that that's sticking out, because, you know, if you have, it's pointing at like a bright light or something like that, it will actually look a little bit more pointy due to lighting effects a lot of the time. So I'm going to, oh yes, look at that. Look at that. The brave one. Went up and touched it. Now, okay, so now there's a problem, right? So what's happening here is the colors are merging, and you know, depending even right now on your screen on what you're looking at this, you might not even be able to pick those apart. So I'm going to duplicate this gradient, because what could happen is I'm using the same gradient as these other guys, so I go to edit this and it changes them too. So I just duplicated it and made a separate copy that I can work on. And now I'm really thankful that I only used 2 stops, so I don't have to do too much messing around. That's kind of cool, right? And there's another thing I'm thinking of right now. So there's that. I want the light to be coming from that general direction. And what I can do is I can take another circle shape. Maybe. Like that. Let's see. Is that right? Squash an oval. And what I can do is just add a touch of a radial gradient there. And we're finally going to use that alpha, right? So turn the alpha way down. And right where that person's touching, I want it to get a little bit brighter. What I do? Oh, I see. I see. I'll keep that down. So even with my alpha set to 0, it does matter what color it is. So I go to the top gradient, and that's the one I want to make brighter. And then, I don't know if it matters if I change. I don't know if you can tell. The colors are so close there. Darken it a bit, maybe. Well, that's kind of cool. What do you think? What do we think? Let's see. It's kind of interesting. I don't think I'm going to rely too much on the perspective, you know, the downhill kind of effect that we had. It's probably not necessary. The arm is looking weird, right? So the arm. Okay, guy. There you go. Right down there on my lap. Good boy. And onto the floor. I don't like how the elbow's bent too much. Why is that? Let's see. That's kind of weird. Oh, that's the gradient. So that line right there is the gradient. That's not actually. So let's get rid of the flab, right? Don't want too much flab. Don't want too much elbow bend, even though there would be some. Is that better? Looking like the arm is a little bit too thin now. So let's move these down together as one. There we go. Okay, so cool. Nice. All right, so he's like, I'd like a Coke, please, and a Twix. All right, so kind of cool, right? So trippy little, this arm is not my favorite. Okay, so I'll just say that. And, you know, maybe there's something quick I can do about that. It doesn't need to be bent so much. It doesn't need to be there, really. But it's there to be different. And I don't know if that's necessary. Kind of silly. Point at the end is not doing us too many favors here. Let's see. And the posture just a little weird, because who would have their legs that far apart, right? If you're posing. But again, I mean, who would be touching a sphere in the middle of nowhere? Nobody. Creepy. Okay, well, cool. All right. Okay, so cool. So there we've made a scene, right? And you know, I'm not going to take this too far. First, because I don't have the interest. Well, I do have the interest, but I don't have the need to. It's already telling a story, right? What is the story? Well, let's turn this into a book cover. And a couple things here. First, the wording. No, first the font. So let's do large. Okay, so this is going to be the name of the book. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's say I stuck with the okay, so I'm gonna have to type in a value here. Now 80, now 90. Okay. I'm gonna change the color of that text, right? And usually when I do text on top of, you know, I want that to harmonize. So I want to use one of the colors that I have in here too. So let's look at that, what that would look like. If I use kind of a desaturated blue. Not bad. Okay, so not bad for now. So the font is kind of weird, right? So that's, and not weird, I mean, it's standard. It looks kind of boring because it's so normal. And picking fonts requires using your creative judgment. And that's really hard for a lot of people because they feel like when they are using their creative judgment, they're kind of stepping beyond the bounds of where they're comfortable. And it's like any other kind of judgment. So if you were asked to be like, let's say, an actual judge in the legal system, for a lot of people, that would be really uncomfortable because they feel like, you know, other people's lives are in their hands or that sort of thing. So judgment in general, my kind of theory is that judgment is best as a servant of creativity. And so when you're creating something, I think it's really smart to get as educated as you can and to get as refined as you can with your perception. So with fonts, that's really important. So look at all the fonts, and I've got quite a few fonts on here right now. Fonts are kind of an exercise in refinement and in refining your thinking about your subject. The standard way of picking fonts, if you were to pick 5 people off the street and ask them to choose a font for a project, most of them would pick based on, you know, A, what I like, and B, does it look decorative in some way? So what I like and is it decorative, those aren't bad, right? And what I like usually boils down to who I am and where I come from. So if you pick a computer programmer, he might say, well, what's wrong with that font? There's nothing wrong with that font. It's readable. You know, the shapes are large and clear. It looks good to me. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, But you've got to understand that somebody like a computer programmer is bombarded with this sort of font from almost the day they're born. So that's who they are. That's their background. Somebody like if you have a soccer mom who's hanging out on Pinterest all day, you would look at this and say, she would look at this and say, that's boring. That's usually things I'm not interested in are represented in that font. So she might look at something and say, oh, a font called Swing Set. Oh, that's kind of cool and quirky, and for all I know, this is a cool and quirky scene, so let's do that. So the getting more refined than that requires us to take an extra step up, and what we do is we say, is it appropriate? And is it appropriate to the project at hand? So what I would say is this font it's definitely decorative, and you might like it. It might look good by itself, but it has to serve the purpose of the project, and that's kind of our creative judgment. So we have to educate ourselves. We have to look at how fonts are used in culture and society. So it requires a little bit more critical thinking on our part, and that's where the whole judgment thing gets uncomfortable, because if you are sitting around becoming a font snob and not creating things and backing up that judgment with creative endeavors, then yeah, you're a font snob. But if you're actually using that judgment in the service of creativity, it's a really, really powerful and effective tool, because it allows you to narrow down all the possibilities into something that is actually a solution. It's not just a decorative fit or something that looks good together with what you've done. It's a precise fit. It's something that is appropriate for the task at hand, and it's solving a design problem. So looking at all the possibilities we have, I don't know if I have time to go through here and pick something that would be appropriate. If this was a paid project, I would probably start by looking at a commercial font catalog like My Fonts or something like that. And before I start, I would say in my head, okay, I'm looking for something that has specific characteristics. One of those might be circle shapes as opposed to lots of ovals. Others might be this sort of, because I've already drawn these people like this sort of loose abstract look, right? And you can go all the way down to the feel, how it feels and what it reminds you of. So if it reminds you of the 70s, you might, or the 60s, psychedelic kind of, you might lean towards something that, looks like kind of old school computer type or something like that, which is how they used to express their feelings about the future, is that it was going to be computerized and also pretty kind of complex in that way. So that's one possibility. Looking around here, let's see, what do we have here? What do we got? I know, for example, if I don't know if I have Future on here, but there's an example of a font that's really, it's got circles, more circular shapes in it rather than kind of an oval O. You've got a more circular O. And especially, that was pretty big with sci-fi stuff. You would see that a lot where they would use all caps or small caps. I don't know, is there a small caps Futura? Probably somewhere, but all caps. And then they would take it and they would space it, change the letter spacing. So the, kind of like this, and then change the font size down. And again, or this. Right, so you get this kind of epic feel between these letter forms. And, maybe that's not super, you can see how it fits, right? Because you've got this really kind of a sparse scene here, and the layout of these letters is kind of sparse too. Then you've got your shapes that are very organic, right? They're very curvy kind of shapes. They just kind of let that spherical curve happen, but they're also pretty precise, which is kind of like our sphere. So for the time being, let's go with that. Now, large art. Where did the rest of our text go, by the way? I have no idea. I think did our line spacing get bumped way up? Is that what's kind of going on? No. Well, our text, the rest of our text is in here somewhere. Okay, so it's gone, but that's fine. About the title, so large. Oh, was there something about that? I don't even remember what the title was that I had written down. But this thing about the large sphere. So with titling, picking the title, something that I picked up from the comics world is that you can call it what it looks like, right? You can do that if you want to. But to really take advantage of the combination of words and graphics and design and illustration, what you can do is you can make the words say something different that's not being said in the illustration. So let's say I said that. Visitors from Mars. Or the visitor from Mars, right? So if I said the visitor from Mars, that's giving you information that's not really apparent here, and it's kind of cool, right? Because you don't have to type the words. You don't have to make up like a Martian flag and put it on the sphere, and it's more nuanced, and it makes you use your imagination. I love it. Okay, so it's something that's not being said in the illustration itself. We're using the text to spell that out. Now, what you can also do is throw in another kind of a twist, right? So I could do something like another Mars. So the visitor from another Mars. Now the letter spacing, might be okay, but the line spacing here needs to step up because those lines are kind of, with the spacing between the letters, it was getting to, you could see that the lines were too close because you almost couldn't tell if you were meant to read the letters vertically or horizontally. So line spacing and letter spacing, they do matter. They do make a difference. I actually like where this is in my composition. It kind of ended up there, but I could move it down here, and what's happening is I'm not kind of in harmony with the spacing that has been established in my illustration. See this extreme left edge of the sphere here. If I can just run it up against that right there, and I could draw a guide in Inkscape by dragging a line out from the ruler. That'd be fine, but it's enough to eyeball it most of the time. And I'll find a good amount of space to give kind of some space behind these people too. But there's an illustration that we just made, a book cover, and it says a lot. It really does. There's a sense of mystery, this sense of loneliness, of foreboding, of this kind of dominant sphere, the contrast between the size of this sphere and the people below it. They've touched the sphere right there, and we've used this gradient to make the effect of this, something happened. Now what's going to happen next? These things that have a cause and effect relationship. So cool. So that's enough, I think, for this little walkthrough. But a lot of fun. And so give it a try. See what you can create with some blobs. See what you can create with a circle and rectangle and some gradients and font. That's it for now.